Out of curiosity, I hid a tiny voice recorder beneath the passenger seat of my husband's truck. That evening, the moment he disappeared upstairs for a shower, I slipped outside, retrieved the recorder, locked myself in the pantry, and pressed play. Within 30 seconds, my entire life shattered. The man speaking was my husband. The woman laughing beside him was someone I knew. And every sentence that followed proved one terrifying truth. He had not simply fallen out of love with me. He had been preparing to destroy me. My name is Natalie Foster. For 13 years, I believed I had built a quiet, dependable life with my husband, Ryan. Nothing about us seemed extraordinary. We lived outside Franklin, Tennessee, in a peaceful neighborhood where children rode bicycles until sunset and neighbors still waved from their porches. Our 10-year-old son, Mason, loved baseball more than homework. Our aging Labrador slept across the kitchen doorway every afternoon. I taught 4th grade at the local elementary school, while Ryan worked as a senior financial consultant for an investment firm in downtown Nashville. People admired him. He remembered birthdays. He volunteered at community events. He never forgot an anniversary. To everyone else, he looked like the kind of husband every family wished they had. That was exactly why I ignored the warning signs. They appeared quietly. Ryan suddenly began taking business calls inside the garage with the door closed. His phone never left his hand. He turned it face down every time it touched a table. He started leaving home nearly an hour earlier every morning, claiming traffic had become impossible, despite driving the same route for nearly a decade. Most evenings, he remained inside his truck after arriving home. The engine would already be off, yet he stayed there staring at the glow of his phone for 10 or 15 minutes before coming inside. Whenever I asked if something was wrong, he smiled gently. "Nothing for you to worry about." Eventually, those words became part of our marriage. Nothing for you to worry about. I wanted to believe him. Life was already busy enough. There were lesson plans waiting on my desk, laundry piling up in the hallway, a son who still asked me to help with science projects before bedtime. Suspicion felt exhausting. Trust felt easier. Until one Saturday morning, while vacuuming Ryan's truck, I found a restaurant receipt tucked beneath the driver's seat. 2 expensive dinners. 2 glasses of wine. 1 dessert. That night, Ryan had told me he was attending a client seminar. Standing alone in the driveway with that receipt trembling in my hand, I felt something unexpected. Not heartbreak. Not anger. Only the strange silence that comes just before a storm finally arrives. When Ryan walked outside a few minutes later, I folded the receipt and slipped it into the back pocket of my jeans. He noticed my hand move. "What are you doing in my truck?" The question came too quickly. I looked up at him and forced my face to stay calm. "Cleaning it out." For half a second, his eyes narrowed. Then he smiled, stepped closer, and kissed my forehead like the perfect husband he knew how to perform. "You always take care of everything," he said. I almost believed the warmth in his voice. That was the dangerous thing about Ryan. He could lie gently. He could betray you with one hand and hold your coat with the other. That afternoon, after dropping Mason at baseball practice, I drove to an office supply store 2 towns over. I bought a small voice recorder, paid in cash, and sat in my car for nearly 10 minutes afterward, staring at the bag on the passenger seat. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Maybe the receipt had a simple explanation. Maybe he had met a client. Maybe there had been 2 people from work and the bill only looked personal. I repeated those excuses all the way home. But by Monday morning, my hands were still cold when I slipped the recorder beneath the passenger seat of his truck. Ryan came downstairs wearing a pressed blue shirt and the silver watch I had given him for Father's Day. He kissed Mason on the top of the head. He kissed me on the cheek. Then he walked out the door carrying coffee in one hand and secrets in the other. I spent the rest of that day teaching children how to divide fractions while my own life felt like it was splitting into pieces. At 6:35 that evening, Ryan came home with barbecue takeout and an easy smile. He asked Mason about practice. He asked me about school. He laughed at the dog for stealing a napkin. Everything looked normal. That was what frightened me most. After dinner, Ryan said he was going upstairs to shower. The moment water began running through the pipes, I stepped outside. The recorder was exactly where I had left it. I carried it inside, went into the pantry, closed the door, and pressed play. At first, there was only road noise. Then Ryan's voice came through. Clear. Low. Cool. She still thinks this is just stress, he said. A woman laughed softly, and my heart stopped. For nearly 40 seconds, I heard nothing except traffic, turn signals, and the soft hum of tires rolling across pavement. Then Ryan spoke again. She has no idea. The woman beside him chuckled. Are you absolutely sure? I recognized her voice before Ryan answered. Claire Mitchell, his marketing director. The same woman who had hugged me at the company Christmas party. The same woman who had complimented my homemade cheesecake while standing just a little too close to my husband. Ryan laughed quietly. Natalie still believes we're just having a rough season. She won't question anything. My fingers tightened around the recorder. Claire asked another question. Did she notice the transfers? No. And even if she finds something, she won't understand what she's looking at. There was a brief silence before Ryan continued. I moved another portion yesterday. By the time she hires an attorney, most of it will already be protected. Every muscle in my body froze. This wasn't only about another woman. This was about money. Our future. Everything we had built together. Claire lowered her voice. What about Mason? Ryan answered without hesitation. That's the easy part. I've been documenting everything. Every time she gets overwhelmed. Every time she forgets something. Every emotional message she's ever sent me. Teachers always seem calm until life pushes them too hard. Once I file, she'll fall apart. I'll be the stable parent. The court will see exactly what I want them to see. I covered my mouth to keep from making a sound. He wasn't preparing for a divorce. He was preparing a strategy. Claire sounded uncertain. That's pretty cold, Ryan. He answered so casually it frightened me more than if he had shouted. Cold would be letting her walk away with half of everything I've built. She became comfortable. She stopped paying attention. She still thinks we're a team. The words landed like broken glass. For the next several minutes, they discussed our savings, retirement accounts, investment portfolios, our mortgage, and even my late father's inheritance. Ryan explained each move with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed it dozens of times. He mentioned lawyers, hidden accounts, timing. He even said they should wait until after Mason's birthday. If she ruins his birthday by getting emotional, it'll make my custody case even stronger. When the recording finally ended, silence filled the pantry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run upstairs and confront him immediately. Instead, another feeling slowly replaced my anger. Clarity. For the first time since finding that restaurant receipt, I understood exactly who my husband really was. And I realized something else. The man upstairs believed I still knew absolutely nothing. That would become the biggest mistake he would ever make. The shower upstairs was still running when I copied the recording onto my laptop. Then I uploaded a second copy to a private cloud folder Ryan had never seen. Finally, I emailed it to myself under the most boring subject line I could think of. 4th grade lesson plans. If anything happened to my computer, I refused to lose the only proof that showed who Ryan really was. A few minutes later, he came downstairs with damp hair and a relaxed smile. He found me rinsing dishes at the kitchen sink. Everything okay? I looked at him. For 13 years, I had believed those blue eyes represented honesty. Now I saw calculation. I smiled anyway, just tired. He accepted the answer, without hesitation. That was his first mistake. The following morning, I woke before sunrise. Not because I had slept well. I had barely slept at all. Ryan lay peacefully beside me, breathing as though nothing had changed. I wondered how someone could calmly plan the destruction of another person's life and still sleep so soundly. When he finally opened his eyes, he smiled. Morning. I'll make coffee. You're amazing. The words almost made me laugh. For years, I had believed kindness was the strongest thing I could bring into a marriage. Overnight, kindness became camouflage. Nothing changed. At least, nothing Ryan could see. I packed Mason's lunch. I signed his homework folder. I stood on the front porch waving goodbye as Ryan backed his truck out of the driveway. The moment his truck disappeared around the corner, I locked the front door. Only then did I allow myself to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just long enough for the grief to leave my body before my mind took control again. At exactly 9 o'clock that morning, during my planning period at school, I made the most important phone call of my life. Not to my sister, not to my closest friend, not to my pastor. I called a family law attorney. The office occupied the second floor of an older brick building overlooking the county courthouse. There was nothing impressive about it. Simple furniture, framed certificates, a coffee that smelled like it had been sitting there since dawn. The attorney introduced himself as Daniel Mercer. His handshake was calm, confident. He invited me to sit. For nearly a full minute, I couldn't speak. Finally, I reached into my purse, placed the voice recorder on his desk, and quietly said the words that changed everything. "My husband is planning to destroy me." Mr. Mercer didn't interrupt. He simply pressed the play button. Daniel Mercer listened to the entire recording without speaking a single word. When Ryan's voice finally faded from the tiny speaker, the office became painfully quiet. Mr. Mercer leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. "This recording is important," he said, "but it isn't enough by itself." I felt my stomach tighten. "It isn't?" He slowly shook his head. "No. Audio can establish intent. Courts still need evidence that supports the intent. Financial records, documents, emails, a pattern." He paused before looking directly at me. "Fortunately, your husband made one enormous mistake. He talked too much." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He explained that people who believe they are smarter than everyone else often reveal exactly where investigators should look. Ryan had mentioned hidden transfers, different accounts, specific timing. That conversation wasn't simply a confession. It was a roadmap. Mr. Mercer pulled a legal pad toward him and began writing. "Do not confront him. Do not accuse him. Do not change your routine. Pretend nothing has changed." Can I really do that? You have to. The safest position you have right now is the one your husband believes you're in. An unsuspecting wife. Driving home, I realized something surprising. The revenge I had imagined only hours earlier no longer mattered. Embarrassing Ryan would accomplish nothing. Protecting my son did. Protecting my future did. For the next several weeks, I lived two completely different lives. The first belonged to Ryan. I laughed at his jokes. I thanked him for picking up groceries. I sat beside him during Mason's baseball games while other parents complimented us on being such a strong couple. I smiled through neighborhood barbecues. I chatted comfortably with his parents over Sunday dinner. Ryan watched me carefully. He saw exactly what he expected. A trusting wife who suspected nothing. The second life existed where he couldn't see. Every evening, I scanned bank statements. I photographed tax documents. I downloaded retirement records. I copied insurance policies. I organized every financial record into carefully labeled folders. Every discovery raised another question. Every answer revealed another lie. Ryan had always managed our investments. I had trusted him completely. Now I understood why. He never wanted me looking closely enough to notice what was disappearing. One night, while Ryan was talking on the phone in the garage, I logged into one of our retirement accounts. The balance was nearly $200,000 lower than it had been the previous year. There was no explanation, only transfers. I quietly took a screenshot, then another. Without realizing it, Ryan was slowly building the case against himself. All I had to do was let him keep talking. 2 days after discovering the missing retirement funds, I found something even worse. Not because I searched through Ryan's private belongings. Because he became careless. He received an urgent phone call one Thursday afternoon and rushed out of his home office without locking the door behind him. Normally, that room stayed closed whenever he wasn't inside. This time, it didn't. I walked past the doorway on my way to the laundry room and noticed a thick black folder sitting open across his desk. For several seconds, I simply stood there. Then I remembered Daniel Mercer's advice. Never break the law. Never steal documents. Only preserve evidence that is legally accessible. I stepped inside. The folder contained investment statements I had never seen before. None of them listed our family accounts. Instead, they belonged to a consulting company called Ridgestone Capital Group. I recognized Ryan's handwriting on several pages. Transfer schedules, projected balances, estimated settlement values. There were handwritten notes besides certain transactions. Move before filing. Delay disclosure. Review after custody hearing. I photographed every page exactly as I found it. Nothing was moved. Nothing was removed. Less than 3 minutes later, I was back in the hallway carrying a basket of towels as though nothing had happened. That evening, I forwarded the photographs to Daniel Mercer. His reply arrived 20 minutes later. Excellent work. Do nothing. Ryan still believes he controls the timeline. Let him keep believing that. Meanwhile, Ryan seemed happier than he had been in months. He started humming while making breakfast. He suggested a family vacation for the summer. He even surprised Mason with tickets to a professional baseball game in Nashville. Watching them laugh together hurt more than I could explain. Ryan truly loved our son. I never questioned that. What I questioned was whether winning mattered even more than being a father. One Saturday afternoon, Mason and I baked chocolate chip cookies while Ryan worked upstairs. As we waited for the first batch to finish, Mason looked up at me. Mom? Yes, buddy? Are you and Dad okay? The question caught me completely off guard. Why would you ask that? He shrugged. You've both been really nice lately. Kinder than usual. Kids notice everything. Even the things adults believe they're hiding. I forced a smile. We've both just been busy. He accepted the answer. I wished I had. Because at that moment, I realized this wasn't only a fight for money anymore. It was becoming a fight to protect the childhood of the person I loved most. 3 weeks after my first meeting with Daniel Mercer, Ryan came home carrying takeout from my favorite Italian restaurant. He smiled as he placed the bags on the kitchen counter. I thought we should celebrate. Celebrate? What? He shrugged. Nothing special. Just us. We shared dinner. We helped Mason finish his math homework. We watched a movie together before putting him to bed. If someone had looked through our living room window that night, they would have seen a perfectly ordinary family. Only one of us knew it was our final performance. At a little after 11, Ryan fell asleep within minutes. I was still awake when my phone vibrated on the nightstand. The message came from Daniel Mercer. Only 5 words appeared on the screen. He filed this afternoon. Be prepared. I stared at those words for a long time. Not because I was surprised, because the waiting was finally over. The following morning, someone knocked on our front door just after breakfast. Ryan walked over first. He opened the door and accepted a large envelope from the process server. Then he unfolded the papers with remarkable precision. His eyebrows lifted. His breathing slowed. His performance began. Natalie, I never wanted you to learn like this. I looked directly into his eyes. Neither did I. For the first time since I had found the restaurant receipt, I watched uncertainty flicker across his face. It disappeared almost immediately. Ryan had always recovered quickly. He believed every situation could still be controlled. Before either of us could speak again, Mason came downstairs carrying his backpack. Who was at the door? Ryan folded the divorce papers neatly. Just some grown-up paperwork. Nothing for you to worry about. Mason nodded and headed toward the kitchen. The moment he walked away, Ryan lowered his voice. I was planning to sit down with you this weekend. I wanted us to handle this respectfully. I nodded calmly. That sounds thoughtful. He searched my face for tears. For anger. For panic. I gave him none of them. Because Daniel Mercer had warned me. Never interrupt someone who believes they are winning. Confident people keep making mistakes. Desperate people become careful. Ryan still believed I was desperate. He had absolutely no idea I already knew every move he had planned. And he certainly didn't know that every confident step he took after filing would create even more evidence against him. The game he thought he had started was already slipping out of his hands. Over the next several days, Ryan transformed into the most reasonable man in Tennessee. He told our neighbors that we were working through a difficult season, with mutual respect. He told his parents we both wanted what was best for Mason. At Mason's baseball practice, he smiled at the other parents and spoke with quiet dignity, making sure everyone saw a devoted father facing an unfortunate divorce. He was writing a story. He simply didn't realize I had already read the ending. Daniel Mercer called it controlled exposure. Don't challenge every lie, he told me. Let him commit to them. The more confident he becomes, the harder it will be for him to explain the contradictions later. So I stayed quiet. Ryan filed a motion requesting temporary primary custody of Mason. According to the documents, I was emotionally unstable, overwhelmed by work, forgetful, and increasingly unable to provide a consistent home. Reading those words felt like reading about a complete stranger. Attached to his filing were screenshots of text messages I had sent during some of the hardest days of my life. One message read, "I can't do this anymore." Ryan claimed it proved I was incapable of handling motherhood. He conveniently ignored the fact that I had written those words after spending 12 exhausting hours at school conferences while Mason battled a high fever and Ryan never came home despite promising he would. Another message read, "I feel like I'm falling apart." Ryan described it as evidence of emotional instability. He left out that my mother had been recovering from major surgery while I was caring for both her and Mason without any help. He hadn't documented my weakness. He had carefully collected moments of exhaustion that he himself had helped create. That realization hurt more than the affair. One evening, I sat alone inside my car outside a grocery store and allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to cry. No more. When the timer on my phone sounded, I wiped my face, walked inside, bought milk, eggs, cereal, and Mason's favorite strawberries, then drove home. Ryan was waiting in the kitchen. "Long day?" he asked with practiced concern. I placed the grocery bags on the counter and smiled politely. "Just a normal Tuesday." For a brief second, disappointment crossed his face. He had expected cracks. Instead, he found composure. Without realizing it, he was becoming frustrated. And frustrated people make expensive mistakes. 2 weeks later, Daniel Mercer called me into his office. When I arrived, several folders were already spread across the conference table. He slid one document toward me. Ryan's official financial disclosure. I scanned the pages slowly. Something immediately felt wrong. The retirement account connected to Ridgestone Capital Group was missing. So were 2 large wire transfers. His annual performance bonus had disappeared. Several investment proceeds that should have been listed were nowhere to be found. I looked up. "He's hiding all of it." Daniel nodded. "More importantly, he signed these documents under oath. That changes everything." I stared at Ryan's signature at the bottom of every page. For the first time since hearing the recording, I felt something close to relief. Not because he was lying, because he had finally put those lies into official legal documents. Paper leaves fingerprints. Words can always be explained away. Financial records cannot. Only 3 days later, another unexpected gift arrived. Not from Ryan. From Claire. She accidentally sent an email from her company account to Ryan's personal email with the subject line "Revised Asset Schedule." Attached was a spreadsheet. Every hidden account. Every projected transfer. Every estimate showing how much money could be moved before the divorce settlement. Ryan forwarded the file to another private account without realizing company metadata remained attached to every document. Daniel almost smiled when he saw it. People think deleting emails removes history. It doesn't. Metadata tells its own story. While the financial evidence continued growing, Ryan made another mistake that hurt even more. He began questioning Mason. At first, the questions sounded harmless. "Does Mom cry when I'm not home? Has Mom been forgetting things lately? Does Mom ever get angry for no reason?" Mason answered honestly. Then one evening, as I tucked him into bed, he looked at me with worried eyes. "Mom, am I supposed to tell Dad things about you?" My heart broke. I sat beside him and brushed the hair away from his forehead.
"No, sweetheart.
You never have to choose between your parents." He looked relieved. "Dad said he just wants to make sure you're okay." I smiled gently.
I'm okay.
"And you don't have to carry grown-up problems." The next morning, I documented every word Mason remembered. Then I emailed my notes to Daniel Mercer. His reply came less than an hour later. "Excellent. Request a child therapist immediately. Protect Mason." Do not use him as evidence. That single sentence reminded me why I was fighting. Justice never asks a child to become a weapon. The temporary custody hearing arrived on a gray Thursday morning. The courthouse felt strangely ordinary. People waited in long security lines. Lawyers carried worn leather briefcases. Coffee cups balanced on stacks of legal files. It looked like any other day. For me, it felt like the day my entire future would be decided. Ryan arrived 15 minutes after I did. He wore a tailored navy suit, a pale gray tie, and the same confident smile that had impressed clients for years. He greeted people politely. He even held the courthouse door open for an elderly couple. Anyone watching would have seen a respectful professional. I saw a man performing for his biggest audience yet. Daniel Mercer leaned toward me. Remember,
No reactions.
the evidence will speak louder than emotions ever could. I nodded. When the judge entered, everyone stood. Ryan's attorney opened first. His voice was calm and sympathetic. He described me as a devoted mother who had recently become overwhelmed by stress. Someone who loved her son but had become emotionally unpredictable. Someone who needed time to recover. Ryan sat quietly beside him with lowered eyes. He looked heartbroken. Then he testified.
He spoke softly, carefully.
Every sentence sounded rehearsed. He claimed he had worried about my emotional health for months. He said I often forgot important responsibilities. He insisted Mason needed consistency. When shown my old text messages, he repeated the same story. I can't do this anymore. That message frightened me as a father. I remained completely still. Daniel Mercer simply wrote one word across his legal pad. Context. When it was our turn, he stood slowly. Mr. Foster, you testified that Mrs. Foster's message reflected her inability to parent. Correct? Ryan nodded. Yes. Were you aware that message was sent after Mrs. Foster completed 12 hours of parent-teacher conferences while your son had a high fever? Ryan hesitated. I believe so. And were you also aware you spent that same evening at an upscale restaurant for more than 2 hours? Ryan shifted slightly in his chair. I had business obligations. Daniel calmly held up another document. Phone location records, restaurant receipts, credit card statements. Every piece fit together. For the first time that morning, Ryan looked directly at me. I gave him nothing.
No anger. No satisfaction.
Only silence. Because the truth had finally begun asking the questions, Ryan answered Daniel's questions carefully at first. Every response sounded polished. Every explanation seemed reasonable. Until Daniel changed the subject. Mr. Foster, did you transfer marital assets into Ridgestone Capital Group 11 days before filing for divorce? Ryan adjusted his tie. That was a business investment. That wasn't my question. Did you transfer marital funds into that account? A long pause filled the courtroom. Yes, but it was perfectly legal. Daniel nodded. Then why wasn't that account listed on your financial disclosure? Ryan glanced toward his attorney. My lawyer prepared those documents. So your testimony is that the omission was someone else's mistake? I relied on professional advice. Daniel walked to the evidence table and lifted another folder. Inside were bank statements,
Wire transfers.
investment records, email correspondence. Every document matched the timeline Ryan himself had described inside the truck. One by one, Daniel placed them before the judge. Then he spoke quietly. Your Honor, we would now like to introduce Exhibit 24. The courtroom became silent. Daniel picked up the small black voice recorder. I recognized it immediately. For a brief moment, my heart pounded exactly as it had the night I first pressed play inside my pantry. Ryan's expression changed. Only slightly.
But I saw it.
He recognized the recorder too. Daniel pressed the button. Static filled the courtroom. Then Ryan's own voice echoed across the room. She has no idea. Nobody moved. Claire's voice followed. Are you absolutely sure? Ryan answered without hesitation. Natalie still thinks we're just having a rough season. She won't question anything. The courtroom remained completely silent. The recording continued. I moved another portion yesterday. By the time she hires an attorney, most of it will already be protected. Ryan slowly lowered his eyes. Then came the sentence that changed everything. I've been documenting every emotional moment. Once I file, she'll fall apart. I'll become the stable parent. The judge stopped taking notes. Ryan's attorney quietly closed his eyes. No one interrupted the recording. No one needed to. Ryan's own words dismantled every argument his legal team had spent months constructing. Daniel stopped the audio before it became unnecessary. He looked toward the judge. Mrs. Foster is not asking this court for revenge. She is asking for honesty, financial transparency, and a custody decision based on truth rather than manipulation. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, I felt something inside me become completely still. I no longer needed Ryan to admit what he had done. He already had, in his own voice. Long before any courtroom ever heard it, when the recording ended, the courtroom remained silent for several long seconds. The judge slowly removed his glasses and looked directly at Ryan. There was no anger in his expression, only disappointment. Ryan's attorney stood and attempted to explain the recording. He argued that private conversations could be misunderstood, that people often exaggerated during stressful situations, that planning finances before a divorce was not necessarily misconduct. Daniel Mercer waited patiently. Then he stood one final time. Your Honor, this case has never depended on one recording. He pointed toward the evidence table. The audio matches the bank transfers. The transfers match the financial records. The financial records match the undisclosed company accounts. The company accounts match the email correspondence. And every document has already been authenticated. This is not one piece of evidence. It is an entire pattern. The judge nodded while reviewing the final report prepared by the forensic accountant. Every hidden transfer had been traced. Every missing investment had been identified. Every omission on Ryan's financial disclosure had been documented. Finally, the judge spoke. Mr. Foster, this court finds your financial disclosures incomplete and intentionally misleading. Your credibility has been seriously damaged. Regarding custody, the court is equally concerned by your deliberate effort to manipulate your son's perception of his mother. Temporary primary custody of Mason will remain with Mrs. Foster. Future parenting time shall continue under structured conditions while additional evaluations are completed. A full forensic accounting of all marital assets is hereby ordered. Ryan closed his eyes. For the first time since I had known him, he looked like a man with no prepared answer. Outside the courtroom, he caught up with me near the elevators. Natalie. I turned calmly. His voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it.
You recorded me.
I looked at him for several seconds. Then I quietly shook my head.
No.
You recorded yourself. You simply forgot that the truth has a way of surviving. The elevator doors opened. Daniel Mercer stepped inside beside me. As the door slowly closed, I watched Ryan standing alone in the hallway. He wasn't defeated. Because of me. He was defeated by every decision he believed no one would ever discover. Months later, the divorce became final. Most of the hidden assets were recovered. Ryan resigned from his investment firm after the investigation concluded. Claire quietly disappeared from the company soon afterward. Mason and I moved into a smaller home on a peaceful street surrounded by maple trees. The house was modest. The furniture didn't match. The kitchen was tiny. But every night, we slept peacefully. Looking back, I finally understood something. My greatest victory wasn't exposing Ryan. It was refusing to become the bitter person he expected me to be. Sometimes the strongest revenge is not destroying someone. It is simply allowing the truth to reach them before you ever do. If this story meant something to you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true-to-life stories about courage, resilience, and quiet justice.